Africa's support for the Palestinian cause has been long-standing. Nelson Mandela famously said after his long walk to freedom that South Africa's freedom is incomplete without that of the Palestinians. But why should Africa and Africans care about Gaza and the Palestinians? That's the question for MOMODOU TAAL, a Gambian graduate student who's had to abandon his studies in the US because of his involvement in pro-Palestinian protests. This is Africa Here and Now. I'm Martine Dennis, and I'm joined by panellists Patrick Smith and Donu Cobra, both of whom are in Abuja. Coincidentally, I take it, right?
It's no big conspiracy. But
All
it's
right.
we understand you're coming to Abuja next month, actually, Martine, so it might be.
You're laying the groundwork for me. Fine. Perfect.
Well, I tried to keep him out, but, I didn't succeed.
Well, Mamadou, first question to you then. So why? You're a PhD student at Cornell University, an Ivy League elite university in the US, and you've jeopardized your education at this prestigious institution because of your activities in support of Gaza and the Palestinian cause. Why?
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you so much for the first question. There's many ways to answer this question. Even going from, you mentioned the school that I go to, I'm in the Africana Studies department. Africana Studies being a department that focuses not just on Black folk in the Americas, but also Black people in the diaspora as well. The heroes I look up to from the studies, the people that I study, my PhD focuses on Sekou Touré and Kwame Nkrumah particularly, but also the likes of Kwame Touré, Miriam Makeba, etc. And fundamentally, when I study these figures, it's not by coincidence that they always linked Black liberation to the Palestinian cause. So, for example, my podcast is called The Malcolm Effect, taken after Malcolm X. Malcolm X has a famous essay called On Zionist Logic, in which he ties the forces that oppress Black people in the United States, for example, going from it was Israel that voted against independence for Algeria, to Israel bombed Tunisia, Israel went against Rhodesia at the time and Zimbabwe, etc. We find that fundamentally that Israel was, in my reading of the history, Israel has always been an enemy of Black people, especially in the continent. If you take it to the Americas, the training that Black police officers receive that kill Black people in the streets, we know that they're trained in Israel. The surveillance that is used on the streets of America, we know that they received those weapons and training and surveillance technologies from Israel as well. So I think almost at every turn, when I think of the struggle for Black liberation, I see that Israel plays a part in holding Black people back. And then finally, why should Africans care? Again, I think the deaths of more than 18,000 children should cause anyone to sit and reflect about the type of world that we live in. In 1975, when it was the official call that Zionism is racism that the UN adopted, it was pushed previously by the OAU, by the Organization of African Unity, chiefly by Sekou Touré. So the question becomes, why is it that so many Black radical thinkers and leaders always connected Black liberation to the struggle that's happening in Palestine as well? That's several reasons.
Absolutely. And this is a view that was held widely across the continent, wasn't it? In the afterglow, if you like, of independence, and everybody, virtually every country on the continent, supported the Palestinian cause. But that's been muddled up somewhat, hasn't it, in recent times? Israel has offered assistance, both technical assistance, security assistance, all manner of things are being taken up and accepted by African countries on the continent, provided by Israel. So therefore, their position is not as clear-cut as it used to be.
I wouldn't take the leadership of today as an example, because I think if we take a great book by Kwame Nkrumah, Neocolonialism in Africa, we also know that there's leaders in the continent of Africa today that don't always have the interest of Africa at heart. So I think so we know some, for example, take what's happening in Kenya, for example, by sending troops to Haiti. We know that after independence, there was after the kind of independence and Bandung conference, there was a real spirit of internationalism, which I think today is not the same way on the continent of Africa today.
I just wanted to slightly contradict you. I come from a minority group in Nigeria, and we fought
Mhm.
a civil war against the federal government. It was called the Biafran War.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have to tell you that Israel was extremely supportive towards Biafra, to the extent that most people from that side of the country, which is the southeast, are actually pro-Israel because they remember the emotional, moral, and financial and other types of support they received from Israel at the time, and not just from Israel, but from Jews. Like British Jewry, for example. My father was the Biafran ambassador to London, and we got tremendous support from the Jews in the United Kingdom, which doesn't mean that I have to support Israel forever and unconditionally, but just to set you right that it's not true that Israel always sides with the oppressor.
I'm not making this about Jewish people. I think it's important, right? I don't conflate Judaism and Zionism, right? Judaism being an
Hmm. Hmm.
age-old religion that has great principles, and actually, funnily enough, it's actually for me Israel that makes the conflation between Judaism and Zionism. Zionism for me is very clear from the people who established it, from Jabotinsky, from earlier on, that Zionism is a settler colonial ideology. And I'm very clear about that. Now, that's not to say it's a Judaism versus black thing, but if you look at Israel today, again, Israel today on the continent, parts of the continent today, in the Americas and several parts of part of the world, I don't think we can, and fundamentally 18,000 children, then I almost I rebuke or refute the kind of framing. Any human being should care about what's happening in Gaza today. Any human being should care.
I agree with you.
I don't think we should live in a world where 18,000 children then we turn turn the kind of other way.
No, agreed, agreed. The suffering, it's non-negotiable. It's as clear as day, what's going on in Gaza. Absolutely. But you were on a student visa, again, at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, and you have now jeopardized what was a golden opportunity for your education and your future prospects. Do you think that it was worthwhile?
I'm still able to get my degree. I finished 3 years of my coursework in which I completed all of my requirements. Where I'm at now is my ABD phase, all but dissertation. I can be anywhere in the world and write my dissertation, which I'm going to do. So I don't think I've jeopardized anything other than the fact that I can't be in the United States, which the world is far bigger than the United States anyway. I've always had interest in going back to Africa. My research focuses on Ghana and Guinea, which I'm going to be spend some time in Ghana. I spent some time in Guinea. So I don't think I've lost out. If the question becomes, you must have no moral conscience to study in the United States, and I'm going to choose my moral conscience every single time.
MOMODOU, you mentioned African solidarity with the Palestinians. And over the years, the Organization for African Unity and now the African Union have tried to put some flesh on those bones. Why is it, do you think, that the Pan-African Organization has tried to do so much for the Palestinians and the Arab League has virtually ignored them?
Good question. I think first and foremost, again, history doesn't start on October the 7th.
Mhm.
This is from the Balfour Declaration of 1917, etc. Before that, with the Zionist Congress talking about very explicitly colonizing the land of Palestine, right? So I think it's not about Israeli response, because again, if this is the response to October the 7th, then what would be the response for over 75 years of colonization? Question on the Arab League. Likewise, history doesn't start on October the 7th, right? Likewise, these countries, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all these countries in the region are just client proxy states. From if you look at the Arab internal conflict when they overthrew the Ottoman Empire, these countries were carved out specifically to better facilitate British and US imperialism. So again, whilst I recognize that the Arab states have not done enough, but I don't look to the Arab states.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but we're actually now in a new geopolitical space.
Mhm.
And the United Arab Emirates and Morocco, as we know,
Oh, they're the
uh,
worst countries.
have signed a recognition deal with Israel, and more to the point, the United Arab Emirates is buying up large chunks of African minerals and
Yep,
African arable land.
yep.
So we're into a new geopolitics. But it is interesting that part of that geopolitics is the integration of Israel into the Saudi and the UAE political project, if you like, because of Israel's technological value to them, and because they can parlay that relationship with Israel into a stronger relationship to the US.
I mean, the UAE is no more arbiter of anything, right?
Say that the UAE is a proxy state of the US now, when the Joe Biden can't even call up the US, can't even call up the UAE to say stop helping the rapid support forces destroy lives in Sudan.
I wouldn't say it's a proxy state, but I think given the fact that you have, for example, Qatar, for example, where you have specific US bases and military bases around these places, and I agree with you, UAE is, believe me, I hate the UAE as much as I hate Israel, probably, right? The UAE is, as you said, it's involved in Sudan, involved in Congo, for example, right? So again, it's not like I have like a kind of one hatred for the US imperialism. I recognize we are in a new geopolitical environment, right? And there's new formations and calculations being made as well. So I do recognize those things.
And what do you think now should be the response of the AU to this new geopolitics? Because you have, as you say, some of the most powerful states, certainly the richest states within the Arab League, in working in solidarity with Israel.
A lot of these countries have derelicted their sovereignty over for security guarantees. I'm into non-alignment myself, meaning that I don't think you have to rush to China or rush to the US or rush to Russia, right? I think Africa need to do what is good for African people. Right.
Right.
Fundamentally, that would be questions of sovereignty, questions of development, questions of technology transfer. Right. These things are important. I don't think you have to align yourself one or the other. But I do think, for me, given what has been allowed to happen with such impunity with Israel, I do have a question. When any African leader will come up and declare their sovereignty, or any African leader develops a project that's not aligned with the US agenda, we've seen historically what happens to those leaders. Right. And I think fundamentally we're talking about what kind of world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a world where every multilateral institution is just rubbished? The UN has no say? Because the impunity Israel has had, it should be worrying to everyone.
MOMODOU, I'm listening very carefully to what you're saying, and I'm rather impressed. You're a young man. You're certainly young compared with us. And I'm wondering how representative you are of your generation.
I could be living in a bubble because I know that I'm in activist circles, but at least the circles that I frequent, there are a lot of people who agree. I know they had during the BLM uprising, loads of young people had an awakening. So when I ask young people, when did you become radicalized, or what was your political shift? They all say during the BLM protest. Right. So I do know there's like an awareness of like issues of like settler colonialism, for example. These words are becoming more and more frequent in our dialogue and discussions.
And that's obviously the Black Lives Matter movement that pretty much started after the death of the killing of George Floyd. And of course, we were in COVID lockdowns as well, weren't we? Which sort of intensified everything, didn't it? I was going to also ask you what your feelings are about the atmosphere generally in America today with the Trump presidency and with the well-publicized crackdown on people who don't share the same opinions, particularly about Israel. I mean, what's your overall impression?
I mean, it's insane. And I mean, the thing is, I'm a victim of that in many ways. I had to leave abruptly, had FBI come into my house, etc.
Tell us about your experience. You were there happily getting on with your PhD, finished year 3, and what happened?
Yeah, I mean, ever since October, the kind of 2023, we've had a sustained campaign on campus calling for divestment. So we kind of identified a few companies that our university is directly involved in. So one of them being that we realized our university produces technologies for the unmanned drones that destroy Palestinian homes. So we were calling for divestment from these companies, etc. And then, long story short, September 2024, we were involved in a protest which brought down, or kind of brought to a standstill, a careers fair, which is for a recruitment drive for 2 weapons manufacturers. I was there for about 5 minutes and then I left. I was spotted because I'd been a known person. I was suspended. I was threatened with deportation from the university. The school kind of relented due to the public backlash. And then ever since that moment, my name had been, I guess, a known name for the protest. Long story short, when Trump said that finally we're going to fine people and deport them, when he signed executive orders, my lawyer said, okay, you're going to be a target. We said preemptively, to protect me and others like me, let's file a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of executive orders. It didn't go to plan. We were meant to see our day in court. The minute we filed, Trump then sent FBI to my house, ICE agents to my house. They were looking for me. They couldn't find me. We lost the first kind of the hearing. We had a second hearing to file a temporary restraining order. The judge kind of said, okay, MOMODOU has merits to his case, but he can fight this from jail. That's what the judge said.
Whoa.
And then etc. So then after 2.5 weeks of me technically being in hiding, I took the decision that to self-deport because I had no longer faith in the courts. Because even my lawyer said to me, you could win the next case, but we have no guarantee the government's going to listen to it.
But you knew, didn't you, MOMODOU, that you were undertaking activity that was contravening the terms of your student visa? You're not supposed to be out protesting when you're on a student visa, I presume.
I don't know if that's true because the First Amendment says that it doesn't say citizens. The First Amendment says persons. It says and persons situated in the US all have First Amendment protection. So it's not just for citizens, for anyone in the US physically, your First Amendment activity is protected. So that's whether you're a student, non-student, illegal, etc. As long as you're presently physically in the US, you have First Amendment protections.
But given the environment, the climate, you were aware of that you were breaching whatever kinds of conditionalities were placed upon you as a student at Cornell. Um, 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 and what were the Cornell authorities like, in your opinion, also? Because it's meant to be quite a left-leaning institution, right?
None of these universities are left-leaning. You have pockets of left-leaning scholars, but you don't have the administration is deeply right-wing, deeply conservative. That's why it always makes me laugh when Trump says these universities are like bastions of left-wing radicality. That is not true. You have professors and faculty who are great, but as an institution, they're deeply right-wing. In regards to my protest activity, there were certain rules like, oh, you can't use a megaphone at certain times, you can't use that. But there's nothing that, for me, I've not been accused of any violence. I've not been arrested. And I think it's important to note, if you look at the government's own brief, the government doesn't say anything about me, my activity. It says that you created an uncomfortable environment for Jewish students. And I think that's important. It doesn't say unsafe, doesn't say violence. I have not been arrested. It says uncomfortable, which I find quite strange because I never go to university thinking I have to be comfortable. My views are always challenged in university. I have white professors who say terrible stuff about Africa in class. But I don't think, oh my God, I'm now unsafe because I hear a viewpoint that disagrees with mine. So I think it's important to note that, like, if I had been arrested, I'll understand. If I had been accused of violence, I'll understand. But you're talking about me expressing a viewpoint.
MOMODOU, as a matter of fact, were there actually Jewish students involved in your protests?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's quite difficult, surely, for the authorities to say if the Jewish students themselves are protesting against arms manufacturers, that the protests are creating an atmosphere that's uncomfortable for Jewish students.
It's strange because if you look at when I was threatened with deportation, I had like hundreds of Jewish students come out in my defense. They
Right.
wrote a petition. They signed the petition.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
They signed a petition in my defense, and they said that whilst we may not always agree with everything MOMODOU says or does, what we can say fundamentally, he's not made us feel unsafe.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, you also host a podcast, I think you've already mentioned it, called The Malcolm Effect.
Yeah.
Can you explain that, what the Malcolm Effect actually is and how it's relevant today?
Yeah, I mean, I think people ask me, when did I get my politics? I think I was gifted the Malcolm X autobiography, Alex Haley edition, when I was 15 years old. And I think that kind of changed everything. Because that also coincided with Barack Obama's election as well. And I remember saying at the time, oh, I'm going to be the first black prime minister of the UK, etc.
Well, you still might. You're still young.
No, I don't think right now.
Going back to this issue of Cornell, yeah?
Mhm,
When I was quite a bit younger, I used to
mhm.
work for British Airways magazine, the in-flight magazine,
Oh,
which
wow.
was called High Life.
Mhm.
Yeah. And one of the assignments I was sent on was I was sent to Ithaca
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
because Ithaca, Cornell, and its surrounding landscape environment were regarded as Ithaca was regarded as an oasis of enlightenment. So I went there to find out if it was enlightened or not. I found the environment extremely pleasant and liberal. Um, if there were any extremists, I didn't meet them. Okay. I mean, that was what, 30 years ago. Yeah. Um, so let's just go back to this issue of Cornell. Did any of the lecturers support you? Did any of them stand by you and say this is ridiculous?
Loads. I mean, I can reveal it now. I hadn't said the time, but from January when Trump signed executive orders, I had a professor told me to live with him. So I moved out of my property and lived in with my professor and his family. That's one example. I had so many lecturers and professors, even my committee. So I was not meant to sit my exams until end of May, actually, in order to get me to be ABD, or but dissertation. But due to my supportive nature, they're like, listen, you're under attack. Sit your exams early. We're gonna help you sit your exams, etc. Like they came through for me. But I want to say that's why I distinguish between the faculty who have been great versus the institution has for me has been left wanting and not been as helpful, but my department and also other members of faculty have been really helpful and supportive.
So, who are these hard right elements that you referred to? Are you talking about trustees or who?
So I would say trustees and also higher level administration.
Right, so you're not going to be anxious to go back to Cornell if you were able in a hurry. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in no rush to go back right now. I think it's nice to get a good break. It's been quite an intense time, so I'm happy to kind of get a break from it and just like focus on my work actually.
I want to ask a philosophical question. I'm a Zionist, okay? I was brought up as one, and I still am. You depict Zionism as a sort of like aggressive invasion, what's the word? Conquistador kind of thing. Um, The reason why I am a Zionist is because I cannot see what other choice Jews had in the early part of the 20th century than to start flocking to Israel because they weren't really welcome anywhere else. They'd suffered tremendous, discrimination and pogroms and hatred in Europe. I always say white Christians have a lot to answer for. What for you would have been a good alternative to
Mm.
Zionism for the Jews who emerged from the Holocaust bleeding and battered?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I think fundamentally, first and foremost, the picture that you painted is that a crime that was committed in Europe. And the question becomes, why do Palestinians have to pay for the crimes of
Yeah.
Europe? That's my
Mm.
first question. And the second thing I say is that, of course, what the history of Europe towards the Jews have been horrendous. But I think in building the paradise of some, you cannot build a hell for another. Right. So what I would say is if we have to, and again, if people want to ask my position, I don't believe in ethno states anywhere, whether Arab, Muslim, Jew. I don't believe in ethno states. Right. If you ask me where I think what should happen in the region today, I believe in Palestinian self-determination, and I also believe in one state, a binational state, where everyone is welcome in that place. So, so my question becomes again, like it's not about the elimination of Jews and from the river to the sea, all these mischaracterizations, but the crime of Europe, which is anti-Semitism, should not become a hell for the Palestinians and those in that region. That's my position on there.
Can I ask you finally, MOMODOU, to explain to us why, in your opinion, the idea and the aspiration of Black liberation is so closely tied to the fortunes of the Palestinians?
I think a couple of things. First and foremost, type of world we want to be in, and secondly, again, those of African descent who recognized colonialism intimately. They saw what was happening to the Palestinian people as a form of colonization. That, again, you began the show by saying Nelson Mandela said our liberation is incomplete because we recognize what has been going on to us and that we don't want that to be for everyone else. I believe in a world that's free for everybody. And given what we've seen in Palestine and Israel, I don't think we can ignore what has taken place. And I feel like as Black people, not to say that we're the moral arbiters, and again, we could have a Black nationalist perspective, but that for me is too close to what's happening already. And I feel like for me, I want to create a better world, a world built on justice, and I can't ignore what's happening in Palestine, given what I know has happened to my own ancestors and history.
That's all from this edition of Africa Here and Now. Please remember to subscribe and share and give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing. Also, let me know your thoughts about today's conversation. You can email me, martine@AfricaHere&NOW.com. Follow us on the socials. Africa Here and Now is also available on major audio platforms as well as on your smart speaker. Don't forget the website, AfricaHere&NOW.com. We recorded this show on Monday, the 28th of April. Our producer is Anne Busby. Our original music is by Enric Adam. Simon Elliott put everything together. Our thanks to our guest, MOMODOU TAAL. And by the way, his podcast is called The Malcolm Effect. And from Patrick, Donu and me, thank you for your company.